All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to In the Blue Corner. This is Vince Lochisano, accompanied by Chris Beach again this week. I believe we'll have Steve Katib coming in at some stage during the show. I hope the change of time hasn't inconvenienced too many of you. Of course, starting at 6 o'clock tonight, going for about an hour, just so that we can all sit back and watch the Brownlow medal coverage starting at 7 o'clock here in the eastern states of Australia. So for those of you who have joined us this evening, thanks for doing that. We look forward to your participation in the show. You can do that, of course, by jumping onto our Facebook page, In the Blue Corner. And In the Blue Corner group is where you'll find us, where you can jump on and make a comment or ask a question. Give your opinion on anything that we're talking about, by all means. Tonight, we'll be asking you to, in fact, give us your predictions for the grand final. Who do you think will win between Geelong and the Sydney Swans? They're the two teams who are going to be facing off for the big prize next Saturday afternoon. And, of course, we'll also ask you to give us your opinion on who you think will win the Brownlow tonight. So, from a Carlton perspective, seeing we're a Carlton-centric show, we're certainly hoping that our captain, Paddy Cripps, can certainly be right up there in the top three by the end of the night. And hopefully, with a bit of luck, you never know, Beachy, he might even pull it off. He'll certainly get off to a very, very fast start ahead of most of the opposition in the first 5 rounds or so.
Yes, agreed, Vince. I mean, we'll like you said, we'll touch on the Brownlow earlier, but the AL is he's going to come out firing in the first 3 games at least. So let's see what happens.
I reckon he might even have 14 or 15 votes up by round 5. Beachy, there you go.
Big call. That's
anyway,
a very big call. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Now, of course, we are coming off the back of the 2 preliminary finals, which were played on Friday night. And, of course, last night, what a fantastic game it was between the Sydney Swans and Collingwood up there at the SCG last night. And, of course, a pretty comprehensive victory at the MCG on Friday night to Geelong. Completely dominated Brisbane, I thought, for most of the night. And the Lions never looked likely at any stage.
Agreed. Completely agreed. Geelong just showed their quality, their class, their silky and clean movement with the footy. And if you're a Geelong supporter, which I know plenty of, you are very happy to see another side like yours back in the grand final again, maintaining the standard that it has maintained for the last decade and nearly more than that, because of what they've implemented in those last few years.
Well, when I looked at the 2 teams this morning, Beachy, I must admit it struck me that these 2 clubs thoroughly deserve to be playing off in this year's grand final more than any others. And the reason I say that is, as you mentioned, the sheer consistency. If you have a look at Geelong's senior coach and Sydney Swans senior coach, they both started at the same time. Chris Scott and John Longmire both started at these 2 clubs. It was their first jobs as senior coaches at the time. It was 2011. So this year is their 12th year of coaching each. And in Chris Scott's reign as senior coach of Geelong, they've only missed out on the final 8 once. Once in 2015, in 12 years. And in John Longmire's case, they missed out twice, in 2019 and 2020. They missed out on the finals and then straight back up into the finals last year. And now, 1 year later, bingo, they're in the grand final. It's an amazing capacity of these 2 clubs to continually put themselves into contention for a premiership. I mean, apart from winning the premiership in 2012, the Sydney Swans played off again in 2014 and they played off again in 2016. They were both losing grand finals, but nevertheless, they were right up there. And here we are again after a brief couple of years that they were out of the 8 in 2019 and 2020. 2 years later, they're playing off in yet another grand final. So, geez, you're doing well if you're a Sydney Swans or a Geelong supporter over the last decade or so.
Absolutely.
And interestingly, they've only won 1 premiership each, both these 2 coaches. And Chris Scott was in his first year of 2011. John Longmire was the year after in 2012. So neither one of them has actually won a premiership in the last 10 years. One of them will break that drought next Saturday. But they've continually had their sides contending by being in the finals and being in the top 6 and being in the top 4, and this year, top 2.
Yeah, exactly. And,
so really they deserve to be there more than anyone else, don't they?
Absolutely. And, Vince, you said it yourself, including myself as well. Their consistencies throughout the year, previous years, they've just continued to be up there. It doesn't matter who they've brought in, whether it's through a trade period or in recent years, the free agency, or even through the draft. They've been able to implement a standard and maintain it for as long as they have.
Well, this year, of course, Geelong finished with 18 wins and only 4 losses, clearly at the top of the table on 72 points, 2 games clear of anyone else, with a percentage of 144.2. And the Sydney Swans basically finished third, but essentially equal second with Melbourne on 64 points and 127.9% at the end of the home and away season. So both clubs have had a great run into the finals. Sydney beating Melbourne in Melbourne really set them up to have that home preliminary final. And I dare say that might have made all the difference last night, having that game played at the SCG, at home, in front of a home crowd. Got a few 50-50 decisions go their way with the umpires. That tends to happen a bit more when you're playing at home. They might have been a bit lucky to get in, but after all, they really did dominate a lot of that match last night before Collingwood characteristically came back from the dead and almost pinched it.
And that's just been typical Collingwood all season. When you think you've had them dead and buried, they have found ways to get back out from the grave, and if not steal it, go close to stealing it. And it was the case.
And with a bit of luck, you never know. They might have actually pinched another one. But as it turns out, despite all of those close wins that they had during the season, their finals record in those close ones is 0-2. Unfortunately for them, they lost to Geelong by a goal and to Sydney by a point. So that would be a bit hard to take if you're a Collingwood supporter today. But nevertheless, despite the overall sentiment of Carlton supporters towards Collingwood supporters, you can't help but feel just that tad sorry for the fact that they had to endure all that pain last night. If you think I was sarcastic, then you're right.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
But anyway, nevertheless, let us know what you think about the results over the weekend. Let's firstly turn our attention to the first preliminary final.
Yep.
Yes, Brad Turner, how good was this weekend after last night? Very, very good. Good of you to join us, Brad. Oh, nice to see Lana joining us again. Hey, Beachy and hi, Vince. Last night was awesome. There was a footy god after all. It does certainly feel a little bit better to be a Carlton supporter today than it was about 3-4 weeks ago when Collingwood were responsible for tipping us out of the finals by a point. I guess there is karma. There is a God after all.
Yes,
and Gina.
We will be touching on that. We'll be touching on that momentarily.
Yep. Gina asks, what's your thoughts on my boy Cripper's chance tonight? It's amazing how many different mothers Patrick Cripps has got. A lot of them are saying he's my boy. Yes.
Not at all.
No, I'm only kidding. Look, I think you'll find that Cripps will be right up there. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't finish top 3. And maybe with a bit of luck might just do a Chris Judd and pull it off. You never know. He certainly started very, very strongly and he finished very, very strongly. Maybe some of those weeks in the middle when we were winning one, losing one, winning one, losing one, maybe just through that period he might be missing for a little bit. But when you've had a good, strong start, you'll have some points in the bank and hopefully that's enough to carry him through to a top 3 spot. And you never know. He might have a Brownlow medal around his neck by the end of the night.
Yes,
Let's turn our attention to the Geelong-Brisbane game, Beachy. It was a bit of a whitewash in the end. Geelong, 18 goals, 12, 120. to poor old Brisbane, 7-7-49. And I must say, even after the first quarter, I think the writing was on the wall, wasn't it?
Putting it bluntly, yeah. The writing was on the wall, and it was just a complete belting in the end. Full credit to Brisbane for getting as far as they did under Chris Fagan. They've had a very good season. Again, they've sort of fallen at the same hurdle again, but I don't think there's anything to be too disappointed with.
Well, I think the fact that they finished fifth and had to do it the hard way by playing every week and having to travel to Melbourne twice. They won their first final only just over Richmond, which was a really memorable win. But then to come here and beat Melbourne was a pretty significant victory last week. Might have just taken its toll a bit. I think Geelong looked far more refreshed and far more energetic, running on top of the ground a lot more than the Brisbane players. Even little examples like Charlie Cameron, he was in the same pocket as last week. Now, last week he turned around and kicked one around his body with the left foot, and it went straight through the middle when he needed to kick a big goal against Melbourne. This week he had exactly the same shot, and he missed it. It didn't even go close. He just barely got a point. So just things like that told me that, they weren't quite on song this week, the Brisbane Lions. Even their tall players, they went in pretty tall for a game that was played in fairly wet and slippery conditions. And Danaher and McInerney and McStay and all of those boys, Gardner, etc., they were almost top heavy, and they needed to really take marks and impose themselves on the game. But their contested marks inside 50 were almost non-existent in the end.
Yeah. Even Lana was saying here for Brisbane, Hipwood was poor.
Hipwood's another one. He was another one I forgot to mention. He had a really good game last week and a really ordinary one this week. Almost nothing he did turned out the way he wanted, and he had a lot of clangers and a lot of missed opportunities.
Well, that said, but if Brisbane could do, if Geelong were just having their way with the footy, look, if Brisbane weren't able to capitalise on their opportunities when they eventually got it, Vince, that becomes a problem for the team that's pretty much on the back foot.
Well, look, I think the margin just kept blowing out after every change. You look at it, 4-2-26 to 2 goals straight at quarter time. Already there was 6 shots to 2 in the first quarter, a 14-point lead there. Then they kicked 3 goals, 5 to go to 7-7-49 at half time to Brisbane's 3-1-19. Again, Brisbane only kicked the 1 goal, won that quarter. 49-19, already a 5-goal lead at half time. If the game wasn't already done by then, it certainly was by 3-quarter time, because Geelong came out and smashed them, kicking 7 goals, 4-46 for that quarter to 2 goals, 1-13, ending up at 14-11-95 to 5-2-32 and 63 points at 3-quarter time. Game was done. It was only a matter of whether Brisbane could come back and make the score look respectable, and they honestly couldn't even do that. Geelong went on to win, kicking 4 goals to 2 in the last quarter. They won 18-12, 120 to Brisbane's 7-7-49. And, a campaign came to an end there for Brisbane. They can probably look back on the year and say it was relatively good compared to previous seasons where they couldn't seem to win a final. At least they won 2 out of the 3 finals they played in this time. And it would seem that Chris Fagan will get himself another contract and continue to coach this side, even though he's into his 60s.
Yes, exactly. And, with Fagan getting another contract, that gives him now another platform to build on what he wants to try and build with Brisbane.
Yeah.
But we will see what happens with that. And Skinner actually brings up a very good point, which which should have been brought up last week as well, was after the game, from what I understand, but didn't quite happen. Mitch Robinson has decided to retire from the game, and apparently he's had a little drive-by at Fagan for not allowing him to say it in front of his teammates. So that's.
Oh, really?
Look, I don't know what's happened there, but that's the.
Wasn't aware of that. I knew he was retiring. I knew that he was done at 33 years of age. But look, he's been a very, very loyal servant to Brisbane and always played hard. He probably played his best matches whenever they came up against Carlton. To be frank, the amount of times he was in their best three against Carlton was unbelievable. But obviously a bit of motivation there because Carlton disposed of him at the time. And so, well done, Mitch Robinson. He certainly got the most out of himself at, probably played for the best part of 14 or 15 years. So, well done. Great career with two different clubs. And it's a pity that it might have finished on a slightly sour note there. But anyway, hopefully he can go on and play, grade football somewhere else in Queensland, or whether he decides to return to Melbourne or even back to his home state in Tasmania. He might even end up back there doing something with the new Tasmanian team. That's assuming it does take its shape.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Who did you feel were the better players in the match, Beachy? It was certainly dominated by Geelong.
Yep. So, look, I can't ignore Tom Hawkins, number 26. He kicked 4 goals, 3, which he could have had 7 on the night had he been a bit more accurate in front of goal. But still 4 goals, 3, 14 disposals, 10 kicks. That's a pretty unignorable performance.
Okay, so 3 votes to him.
Yep.
Yep.
Who else am I going to go with? You know what? I'm going to go with Brad Close for 2 votes. Number 45. He got a goal and he got 22 disposals. That said, he was handballing more than he was kicking. But you know what?
Pretty impressive player, though, isn't
he? Yeah, he was finding his targets in one way, shape, or form. So it obviously didn't matter because Geelong were just pushing their way through when they needed to.
Yeah.
And then for 1 vote, you know what? I'm going to throw in Tyson Stengel, number 18. He got 3 goals. So,
Eddie Betts' project player.
Pretty much. Yeah. He got 3 goals. He got 10 disposals, and he laid 4 tackles to go with it. So you can't ignore that, in my opinion.
Yep. Well, three pretty valuable goals too, weren't they? In the end, look, I'm going to go a little bit different to you. Not totally different, but I've got to say I really admire the game of Paddy Dangerfield. I'm going to give him the 3 votes. I really thought he was brilliant. 28 disposals, of which 22 of them were kicks, 9 marks, kicked a couple of goals, probably could have got another 1 or 2. I just thought it was a signature match by Danger, and if that's any indication as to how he might play next week, I don't see how they can be beaten if he plays like that.
No, that's a fair
So I'm
call.
going with Dangerfield for my 3 votes.
Sure.
I gave Hawkins my 2 votes for the same reasons that you did. Kicked 4 very valuable goals and even laid 4 tackles down there at full forward. So, really good game by Tom Hawkins. And I gave my 3rd vote to another underrated midfielder, certainly not underrated at Geelong, but I think underrated around the competition, and that's Mitch Duncan. I got a lot of time for him. Really, really good player. 26 possessions, 4 tackles again, 10 marks, was everywhere. And look, you could have given it to a lot of different players. Even I want to give a big mention to Zach Tui. I thought he played really well, the former Carlton player. But there were others, Zach Guthrie, Mark Blitzavs, Jake Kolodjasny. He played well. there was a lot of them. You know, Close, as you mentioned, number 45. Even Cam Guthrie, and of course Tyson Stengel, who kicked 3 goals from only 7 kicks. But look, they've got such an even team that they don't have to rely on any one particular player to get over the line. That's the thing about Geelong. They've got so many dangerous players everywhere, all over the ground. It's almost impossible to keep all of them quiet. And the other player that really I take my hat off to coming off that half back line is Tom Stewart. I mean, the guy is just so measured in how he goes about his business, isn't he?
Yeah.
Reminds me of the old Bruce Dull.
That's fair enough. He's missing the headband and the crane and the cranium.
Actually, it's amazing how many Geelong. It's amazing how many Geelong players have actually got a headband. Did you know that, Beachy? They actually had a little article I noticed recently on the headbanded Geelong. I think there might have been 6 or 8 players that got a headband. They wear it's not the thick headband. It's just the string basically that goes across. Yeah.
The thin one.
Even Tom DeConning's brother Sam, he wears one.
Now he's one to keep an eye on, because when I saw him play against us, he's just stood up nearly every time, and boy, has he got someone watching his back in Tom Stewart, and he will he'll just
that's right,
thrive off his mentorship.
Well, for Brisbane, you know what the striking statistical fact of the game was for Brisbane? How many players got 20 possessions or better?
So hang on, Neil got. I know Neil was 1.
Yeah, Lachie Neale. That's it. He's the only one who got 20 possessions. Exactly 20 possessions. 10 kicks, 10 hand passes, and took 2 marks and laid 3 tackles. He was probably, to some degree, you know, blanketed on the night, but he could still well have been given their best player tag.
Yeah.
It's hard to know who to give votes to if you're looking at giving votes to Brisbane players, because most of them had a down night. Most of them.
Yeah.
You know, no one was really dominant from a disposals point of view, and even the what do they call it? The goals. How many of them had multiple goals, Beachy?
I don't think...
Only Hipwood had 2 goals right at the end, when the game was pretty much done and dusted. True?
Yeah. Yep. It was a bad night for Brisbane.
It wasn't a good night. And Hipwood probably had one of his worst nights. I mean, to have kicked a couple of late goals probably saved him from total embarrassment, to be honest, because I thought he had a shocker. So if he's the only player that kicked 2 goals after having a so-called shocker, it just goes to show you how much the others were blanketed on the night. So, yeah, I think it was an overall comprehensive win. I think it's fair to say, by Geelong over the Lions. And, well, obviously Brisbane have got some areas that they need to work on for next year. And they'll have to plug some holes in that team that they need to get better at. And whether they do that through drafting or trading or however they do it, I'm not sure. Maybe organic growth, but they're not quite the premiership team yet. And they've been in contention for the last, 4 or 5 years they've made the finals?
Roundabout.
Yeah, so they've been there and thereabouts. They've always been around that sort of 3rd to 6th area, but they just can't seem to crack it for a grand final, and let alone a premiership. So they've got to get better at what they're doing. A bit like Geelong, they've been there and thereabouts for a number of years now. Geelong have finally cracked it for another grand final. Yep. Maybe it's Brisbane's turn next year. Who knows?
Maybe it is.
All right. I think we've done that game enough. If anyone wants to give us their comments on what their thoughts were for the game, I think Geelong were pretty comprehensive myself. Hard to see them getting beaten next week, to be honest, based on that performance.
I'm in agreement.
Let's go to last night's classic preliminary final. It reminded me of 1996, Beachy, when you were only when you were only in your 20s. I'm only kidding. You were only 4 in 1996, were you? There you go.
Yeah.
Well, in 1996, 26 years ago, there was a famous preliminary final. I'm not sure if you've seen videos of it, but
I have.
Sydney Swans played Essendon. Essendon were the favourites, but it was played up at the Sydney Cricket Ground, and Tony Lockett took a mark when scores were level. The siren went, and all he had to do was make the distance. He kicked the ball, and it sailed through for a point, and the Sydney Swans won the game. And I've never seen a player completely swamped by people congratulating him after scoring a point in all my life. Maybe even more people were swamping Tony Lockett that night than what they swamped Barry Breen after he kicked the winning point in the 1966 premiership over Collingwood, when St Kilda won their only premiership by a point back in 66. But anyway, that was 56 years ago, Beachy. Let's not go back that far.
No,
but
that's right.
Sydney Swans last night, I think they won the game at the start, don't you? I mean, they kicked the first, 4 goals?
Did. 4 goals to
in the end,
nothing.
Yeah. Gee, Collingwood were brave, though. Let's be frank. Let's put all hatreds aside. They were brave. And to come back from, I think at one stage in that third quarter, they were 6 goals down.
They were. Yep.
Was it in the third quarter or the second quarter? I can't remember. But at one stage, I know that they were 6 goals down. I'm pretty sure it was the third. It was early in the third quarter that they got 6 goals up, Sydney, and Collingwood eventually whittled that back in the third and last quarters to what they basically whittled it down to 0, almost 0, 1 point. But let's go through the game. First of all, the final scores were 14-11-95 to Sydney, Collingwood 14-10-94. Quarter time, the scores were 6-3-39 to 3 goals straight 18, and probably fair to say that straight kicking was the only thing keeping Collingwood barely in it.
Yes.
Then Sydney kicked another 5 goals 4 in the second to 4 goals 1 to increase their lead. 11-7-73 to 7-1-43. So that was a 5-goal lead at halftime, exactly the same as Geelong and Brisbane. Notice? Both of them had a 5-goal lead at halftime. The difference was that Geelong went on to thrash Brisbane by 71 points, whereas Sydney, another minute to go in that game, and I dare say they probably would have lost it.
They probably would have.
The third quarter, they were outscored. They kicked 2 goals 3 to Collingwood's 3 goals 4. So Collingwood reduced that lead back to 23 points by 3-quarter time. And you could just feel it in your bones, couldn't you, Beatty? That Collingwood comeback was on. You just knew that you couldn't discount them. And the way they'd been playing all year, you just knew that they were somehow going to, force a comeback of sorts. And come back and really make a game of it. And that's exactly what they did, kicking 4 goals 5. Slightly inaccurate there in that last quarter. 4 goals 5, 29, to Sydney kicking only a 1 goal 1-7. And that was the 1 goal that got them back to a 7-point lead, I think, at one stage. Or it might have been an 8-point lead in that last quarter, when there was a controversial goal to Papley. What did you think of that?
It's interesting.
That was the only goal that Papley, that the Sydney Swans kicked in the last quarter, and he was the one who appeared to push the Collingwood player in the back, and then tried to take a mark after doing that, and the ball seemed to hit the deck before it went back into his stomach. I don't think the umpire saw that, and he paid him a mark.
Yeah, exactly. But, it's interesting.
Or was it a free kick? I don't know. Was it a free kick or a mark?
I think it was paid
I thought he might have paid the mark. Mm.
Yeah, I think it was paid the mark, if anything. That said, Vince. If anybody actually watched the press conference with Craig McRae, he actually said, "I don't live in a world of if onlys or what ifs," and I thought that was actually quite well said by Craig McRae because it's very easy to jump to that straight away. But he said, "No, that's not."
A coach would have to say that, to be frank, but us back here in spectator land, we've got every right to look at these sorts of situations and umpiring decisions and look at them for what they are. I mean, that's a turning point in the game, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, if that had been paid push in the back against Tom Papley and the Collingwood defender ends up kicking it out of there rather than Sydney scoring a goal, it probably results in a very different outcome, doesn't it, for the whole game?
Yes, it does.
If people tell me that umpiring decisions can't turn games of football, I think they're living in la la land. And I know it's not the only decision in the game, and there's probably, 50 free kicks given and 50 non-free kicks that are not given in any match. But these things can sway the whole game.
Yep, it can. It can. It doesn't matter if you go to a game. It doesn't matter if you're watching it at home or if you're listening to it anywhere else. It can just happen like that.
A bit like Wayne Harms, slapping the ball back in from the fourth row of the stands when he did that in the 1979 grand final. Collingwood supporters still haven't gotten over that 43 years on.
I was told it was Rosette growing up, but
that's right. Well, Wayne Harms will tell you, if you're a Carlton supporter, he'll say no, it was in. But if he finds out you're a Collingwood supporter, he'll tell you it was definitely out because it just rubs it in even more. Anyway, all that matters is the umpire's decision in the end. But look, as usual, Collingwood supporters can go home and grizzle and complain and grumble about the umpiring all they like. It's not going to change the fact that on the scoreboard by the end of it, they've lost by a point. Anyway, Let's go back over the game. I've given you the quarter-by-quarter scores. Who did you think were the best players for each team? Who would you have given you 3-2, 1-2 for Sydney?
For Sydney, you know what? I'm going to give it to number 14, Callum Mills. He might not have hit the scoreboard, Vince, but it's hard to ignore 27 disposals, 13 kicks, 14 handballs, 6 marks, and 5 tackles. You cannot ignore that. So I'm putting that on. Isaac Heaney for 2. He kicked 1 goal, 1, but 16 disposals, 11 kicks, 5 handballs. 6 tackles with 7 marks. Sydney's pressure was right on from the get-go, and it's very hard to go past that. And you know what? I could say Luke Parker for the one who got 23 disposals with 5 tackles, 15 kicks.
Kicked the goal.
Kicked the goal as well. But there's a player for the Sydney Swans who I think might just be a bit underrated in the competition, and he wears the number 1, Chad Warner.
I like him. I like him a lot. Yeah, he's in my votes.
He got 22 disposals, 5 tackles. Might not have taken many marks, but it was what he did without the football. If he did have it, he was making an impact. And for me, that is important in a prelim.
Yep, absolutely. And I again, you use the word impact there. My votes were based on players that didn't necessarily get the most possessions, but had the most impact on the game, in my opinion. And I gave 3 votes to young Rowbottom. James Rowbottom, I reckon, is going to be an absolute star of the future, this kid. 18 possessions. He laid 10 tackles on the night. 10. And kicked a goal as well. And I just thought he had a fantastic influence on the game. I gave him my 3. I gave Warner my 2 votes. Number 1, again, 22 possessions, but 3 tackles, kicked the goal, was absolutely everywhere, and his quality of disposal. It's not so much sometimes how many disposals, but this guy went at 72%, which is above average. And I just thought he was really impressive. The other one I thought I couldn't leave him out was Tom Papley. He was a little live wire. He fires them up. He gets the crowd going. You've got to admire how this guy goes about things. His 16 possessions included 13 kicks and 5 marks, and of course he kicked 3 goals in the process, including that all-important last one in the last quarter. So they were my 3-2-1. But you could have given votes to Goulden. I thought he was brilliant. Mills, like you did. Heaney, even the ruckman Hickey, I think, did a really good job on the night. 27 hitouts, I should say. Comprehensively on his own, really, tackling the ruck against both Cox and Cameron. So, yeah, they were my best Sydney players. And what about for Collingwood? Seeing it was such a close game, I think we could find 3-2-1s for Collingwood players too, can't we?
Yes, I think we can.
Who do you reckon was the best players for Collingwood?
Tell you what, it's a tough one for 3 votes, actually, because...
Do you want me to give you my votes first and give you some time?
No, I think we'll go with it, Vince. Thank you, though.
All right.
Because I honestly think, I could say Crisp, but I'm going to say Pendlebury. Number 10. They both had 29 disposals each. They laid 6 tackles apiece.
Yep.
You could throw it. You could throw it to either of them. I'm gonna give the 3 to Pendlebury. 2 will go to Chris, but it's very, very close. And then
you could raffle it between the 2 of them, really.
Yeah, you could. And then, you know what? I'm going to give it to Darcy Moore because he
did very well. When he went on to Franklin, he absolutely blanketed him, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And he might not have had the complete game. Like he might not have been making the intercept marks all game. But when the chips were down and his club needed him, he stepped up and he was able to get those intercept marks and get them to slingshot forward. So there are my votes: Pendlebury, Crisp, and Moore.
Okay. Very good. I went similarly. I thought Crisp was brilliant. Was his 200th game?
Yes. Yeah.
It was his 200th game. I think he played a great game. 29 possessions, 19 kicks, 10 hand passes, 6 tackles, kicked a goal, really set them alight. That was the first goal that Collingwood kicked in the first quarter because they were 4 goals down, and it was Crisp's goal running right through the middle after a centre bounce that got them going. And, he was instrumental on the night in getting Collingwood back into the game. I thought Pendlebury was brilliant. It's no wonder he's still playing, and they'll keep him playing next year too by the looks of it. 29 possessions, again, 6 tackles. What more can you say about the captain? He was brilliant. And look, the only thing I'll say against Moore was that it was his kick across the ground in that third quarter that cost Collingwood a goal when it was intercepted. I think, mind you, he shouldn't take all the blame. Jeremy Howe, he was kicking it to Jeremy Howe, and for some reason, Jeremy Howe was going backwards to take that mark rather than meeting the ball forwards. Now, maybe the kick was going too far for him to go forwards. I don't know, but the more he went backwards, the more time it gave the Sydney player to intercept that ball. And he ended up marking the ball and running into an open goal, and that was a costly goal at the time, I thought. So that's about the only blemish on Darcy Moore's game, if you want to give him a blemish at all. But yeah, I thought he was pretty darn good, especially when Franklin had the better of those other 2 defenders. Who was he up against initially? I'm trying to remember. Well, I think he was up against Maynard first, wasn't he? I think Maynard might have been his first opponent. and I don't think he could handle Buddy. I think he got the better of him. And then Jeremy Howe went on to Buddy, and he couldn't handle him either. And I think that's when they put more onto him. And that's when Buddy all of a sudden didn't do too much after that. So I thought, Darcy Moore for a vote. That's pretty much fair enough. I'd give him a vote too. So just the other way around from what you said, I've gone for Crisp 3, Pendlebury 2, and Darcy Moore 1. And a bit of a mention to Josh Dacos, who I thought was instrumental in getting Collingwood back into the game. Probably could have got a bit more of the ball, but very effective disposals every time we got the ball.
Yeah, I've got nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
And his brother Nick, they were both good.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, Collingwood have lost by a point. What a shame. So the grand final next week, Beachy, who do we think is going to win? Geelong and Sydney. Do you think it's going to be a one-sided affair, or do you think it could end up being a grand final for the ages where it's a close game?
Well, before I give you my prediction, Vince, I think we should make note that I'm not sure if this is correct or not, but I was having a look at the history of the grand finals that have been played at the time of AFL, VFL.
I don't think these two have ever played each other, by the way, in a grand final, have they? The Cats and the Swans?
That's what I was about to say. That's what I was about to say. I don't think they've played each other in a grand final at all. Even when the Swans were South Melbourne, I don't think they played each other in the grand final. So this is the first time it's happening.
Yep.
That said, I think it's going to be a Geelong premiership. It's going to be a question of how much. I'm not discounting Sydney whatsoever. They have been, as you said, at the top of the show, Vince. They've had a very good system. It's been consistent. Longmire's drilled a standard into them that they stick by nearly every year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're looking at a 2007 victory like Geelong did over Port Adelaide. I think we're looking possibly at a 2-goal victory here to the Cats.
2 goals only. So you think it'll be a pretty close game?
Yeah, I reckon it'll be a close game.
Well. I hope it is, because I don't like watching grand finals that are one-sided and the results pretty much known by half time, because I think that's a bit of a waste. But I hope Sydney bring their best possible football with them as they travel down to Melbourne for this game at the MCG. I don't think the MCG harbours any fears for them. They seem to have had a pretty good record there, especially against Melbourne in the last few years. But nevertheless, it is still away for them. Geelong would feel like it's more their home game than what Sydney would.
Yep.
I do believe Geelong will. My head tells me that Geelong will win comfortably. In fact, probably to the tune of about 8 goals comfortably. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's an absolute cliffhanger. And I hope that Sydney Swans get up. I'll be barracking for them. I hope they get up by, I think 8 points might be a good margin for them. Wouldn't that be a great win? But I don't care if it's 1 point. I'd be rapt if they got up. But nevertheless, both teams really deserve to be there, as I said at the start of the show. So I just hope it's a grand final for the ages, and that we get to see the best of both teams. I do believe Sydney will go in with a few more injury concerns than Geelong. It's interesting that Geelong's young player, number 9 there, he went off injured.
Max Holmes.
Yeah, Max Holmes. They reckon, I heard Chris Scott speaking in his press conference after the game, and he reckons that despite what it might look like to all of us, the medicos are saying that he's a good chance to play. Maybe he's the Max. Maybe Max Holmes is a bit like the Fraser Brown of Carlton in '95 when he was in that hyperbaric chamber and all those sorts of things to try and get his knee right for the game. When we played Geelong in the '95 Premiership. So maybe Max Holmes is going to be the Fraser Brown of the Geelong side this year. But Sydney have also got their injury concerns. I know Sam Reid went off and he had to be subbed off in their game last night. He's a vitally important player to them, you would think. He was actually quite good before he went off. If they don't have him available, that's a big hole they've got to fill with someone else. Their defence looks quite solid, although when Collingwood really put the pressure on last night, you know, they also leaked goals, didn't they, towards the end?
They did.
So the McCartan brothers, they're a good story at the moment. The McCartan brothers, Tom and Paddy, they seem to be playing really well with each other down there in defence. Hopefully they can stave off the Hawkinses and the Jeremy Camerons, etc. of the world. But I just think Geelong is primed. I just get this feeling about them. They're a lot like Carlton of 1995. You know, they're going for 16 wins in a row like we did when we won the premiership. So I can't help but feel there's a little bit of destiny in this one. So my head tells me Geelong by 8 goals. My heart tells me Sydney by 8 points.
You know what? I don't think anybody would be disappointed with that if that was the case. Because I still reckon this is going to be a good game one way or another.
Yeah. What about Buddy? Do you reckon he's looking a bit suspect fitness-wise or not?
Yeah, look, maybe. I've got a comment here from Brad Turner saying he'll need to kick 5 or 6 against Geelong for the Swans to...
I tend to agree. If he can really take this grand final by the skin of his teeth, or take the bit between his teeth is what I'm trying to say, and really take charge of this grand final and kick 5 or 6 and really impose himself, he will pose quite a lot of problems for Geelong. But if he's kept quiet and doesn't really kick more than 1 or 2, I just can't see how Sydney can beat them. But anyway, you never know. He's had a couple of disappointing grand finals, Buddy. I think the 2016 grand final might have been his most disappointing one. So hopefully he's going to be fit enough to play and fit enough to do well.
Yeah, exactly. If you want, as a neutral supporter, like most of us here, we would want everyone at full strength, full capacity for a great game to watch on Saturday. Yeah.
All right. Let's hope that it's a great match. Good luck to both sides. And good luck to the 2 coaches as well. They've certainly earned their places in the grand final this year, Geelong and Sydney. All right, let's move on to the Brownlow Medal Duty, which is about to start in about 12 minutes. So let's try and finish this up in the next 6 or 7 minutes if we can, and give everyone a chance to have a quick break before we start tuning in the televisions to Channel 7. I think it's on Channel 7, isn't it, for the Brownlow Medal?
Yes, it is.
So,
I've got in the background.
Fantastic. Do you want to give us a quick rundown of the market for the Brownlow Medal tonight?
Yep. Now, I'm looking at Sportsbet here, guys, for anyone that's looking at it. And, of course,
it'll be similar odds everywhere else.
Yeah. We encourage everyone to gamble responsibly if they decide to have a punt on the Brownlow.
Yeah, don't go putting your house on it.
No, exactly. Currently, as it stands, we have Lockie Neal as the favourite for the Brownlow, currently sitting at $2.80.
$2.80, Lockie Neal.
Followed by Clayton Oliver at $3.75. And then our captain, Patrick Cripps, sits at $5.50. So he sits at $5.50 to take out the...
So he's third favourite.
Yep. Andrew Brayshaw then sits at $8.
He's the Fremantle midfielder.
Yep. Took Miller from the Gold Coast Suns sits at 10.
Yep. I think he's going to poll really well.
I tell you what, if you're looking for value, I reckon that's almost it, just quietly.
Yeah.
$10 there. Petrarca from the Demons at 13, and then we drift out a bit next to Rory Laird at 67, Callum Mills and Sam Walsh at 81. Rosie and Cameron at 101, and we'll finish with Cam Guthrie, Chad Warner, Dion Prestia, Luke Parker, Ollie Wines.
Yeah, but they're all well over 100 to 1. So let's look at all of the
151.
market under 100 to 1. All I've got, according to TAB, is Lockie Neal at 280, Clayton Oliver at 350, Patrick Cripps at 550, Andrew Brayshaw at 10, Took Miller at 10, and Christian Petrarca at 16. Everybody else is at 100 to 1 or better.
Yep.
Wow, that's a pretty narrow market.
It
doesn't normally get down to only
market.
6 players. Most other years, other players will be in there at 20 to 1, 25 to 1, 50 to 1. But it's gone from Petrarca at 16 to 1 all of a sudden to Callum Mills, Rory Laird at 100 to 1. So anyway, it'll be interesting. Even Nick Dacos is at 150 to 1 and Sam Walsh is at 150 to 1. Jackson McRae, these players are like ball magnets, 150 to 1. So if you like any of these at big odds, show Bolton, 150 to 1. Tell you what, there's some massive value. If you're prepared to back against those 6 favourites, there's a lot of value.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable. Don't forget you can bet each way too, I think, because I think that means they've got to finish in the top 3, don't they? If they if they get in for a place. I'm not sure if you can bet each way with everybody, but anyway. All righty. What are your tips for the Brownlow, mate? We've got 3 minutes to go.
Look, I think.
By the way, everyone, if you want to give us your tips, send us your tips through the Facebook page quickly.
Yep, and we'll try and bring them through as quickly as we can.
Yep.
Look, I think it's hard to go past Lockie Neal at this point. He's had a pretty good season with Brisbane. As much as the Carlton supporter in me would love to see Cripps go up and take it from him, I think it'll be very hard for us to go past Lockie Neal.
Okay.
Then again, look, it's a question of who's taking votes off him. So I think we'll just see what happens there.
Who do you like for second and third? Quickly.
All right, I'll put Cripps and Andrew Brayshaw as my top 3. So Neal, Cripps, Brayshaw.
Neal, Cripps and Brayshaw for Beachy. I'm going to go for Patrick Cripps. Peter Vlahos has gone for Lockie Neal. Brad Turner for Cripps by 1 vote. I agree with you, Brad. I reckon Cripps by 1 vote. I'm going to go for Paddy Cripps. I think he deserves it. A brilliant year, really, when you look at it, even from a leadership point of view. He's the one that stood up more than anyone else in our team. And, it was the first year that he was given the captaincy on his own. And he really stood up for Michael Voss in a year that it was Voss's first year as our coach. And he really led the way on the ground, I thought. So Cripps for me to beat Andrew Brayshaw to come in second and Took Miller from Gold Coast third. I'm actually leaving out the 2 favourites, Neal and Oliver. I think they've had better years in other years. So I think that they won't necessarily be seen to be as dominant as what we in the media and in the grandstands think. I think the umpires might not quite be as generous to them this year. But Cripps, Brayshaw and Miller for me, followed by Neal and Oliver. All right. If there's a dark horse, what would it be, Beachy? If there was an absolute blowout result that won the Brownlow medal, who would it be?
That is a great question.
Let's look at one of those 100 to 1, 200 to 1 shots.
Maybe Connor Rosé from Port Adelaide, but I just don't see
it. 250 to 1. All right, Connor Rosé, you reckon for a Brownlow? I think if anyone's going to blow them out, it'll be someone like Shai Bolton. I just think he's going to get the umpire's eye. And wouldn't it be an amazing story if someone like Nick Dacos in his first year of football at 18 years of age, probably going to win the NAB Rising Star Award hands down. He'll probably, imagine if he takes it out. Even if he got into the top 5, it'll be a tremendous result for him. Anyway, let's enjoy the Brownlow medal. It's about to start in 5 minutes. For those of you who have participated in our show tonight, thanks very much for doing that. We really appreciate your support. Next week is the big grand final at the MCG at 3:20 p.m. Geelong versus the Sydney Swans. Let's hope it's a great game. Let's hope the best team wins. And we'll be there we'll be back with you on Sunday night next week at 8 o'clock for our final show of the year to wrap up the grand final, to give you our votes and go over the game. And we look forward to your company next Sunday night at 8 o'clock when we take you back in the blue corner once again. Beachy, thanks very much for your involvement tonight. Unfortunately, Stevie, I don't think has been able to join us this evening, so I know that he'll definitely want to be part of it next Sunday night. So hopefully we can get you back as well to give us your thoughts on the grand final. And with any luck, we might even get Joe to join us and give us his thoughts. So it'll be our last show, so we might as well have everyone on board. Right. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next Sunday night. In the meantime, have a great week, grand final week. This is Vince Lochisano saying good night.
And it's Chris Beach here saying good night.